The phone felt hot in my palm, as if it had become a conduit for something dangerous to enter. My carefully con eye ended the call with shaking hands, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I could feel it in my throat. At 3:47 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee, sitting at my small kitchen table in the dark, watching the numbers on the microwave clock advance toward morning. At 6 a.m., I opened my laptop and checked my email with trembling fingers. The message from Dante was sitting at the top of my inbox, sent at 2:34 a.m., just minutes after our phone call ended. The subject line was simple: "Opportunities for Maya Santos." I almost deleted it without opening it, my cursor hovering over the trash icon. But that same traitorous curiosity that had made me answer his call made me click instead. The email was brief, just 3 short paragraphs and an attachment. "Maya, I apologize for startling you tonight. My approach was too direct, too intense, and I've made you afraid when I intended to offer help. Let me clarify what I'm proposing. I run several businesses that require absolute discretion and unwavering loyalty. I need someone intelligent, observant, and motivated to handle sensitive matters with professionalism and care. You possess all these qualities plus the desperation that ensures dedication. I'm offering you a position with a starting salary of $95,000 annually, full benefits, flexible hours that accommodate your daughter's schedule, and a signing bonus that would immediately address your current financial needs. The attached document provides a detailed outline of the position. Read it, consider it, and we'll discuss when you're ready. I'll be in touch. Dante Moretti." $95,000. The number made my vision blur, my mind immediately calculating what that would mean. Rent is paid easily every month with money left over. Lily's asthma medication without the constant insurance battles. New shoes when she needed them, not when I could finally afford them. The science museum membership, the art classes, and ice cream from the good place. Everything I'd been denying her, denying us both, suddenly possible. My hand moved to the attachment before my brain could engage its better judgment. The document was professionally formatted and appeared to be a legitimate employment contract. The position was listed as executive assistant. Responsibilities including managing schedules, handling correspondence, attending business functions as a representative of Moretti Industries, and maintaining absolute confidentiality regarding all business matters. Nothing in the job description seemed illegal or even particularly unusual. It could have been a job posting for any high-level executive position. But the salary was too high for what was described. Executive assistants, even well-paid ones, didn't make $95,000 a year. Not in this city. Not for the relatively straightforward tasks outlined. Which meant the real job, the actual responsibilities, were hidden between the lines of corporate language and professional formatting. I scrolled to the benefits section and my breath caught. Health insurance with zero deductible, covering all pre-existing conditions, which meant Lily's asthma would be fully covered. No more rationing inhalers, no more emergency room visits I couldn't afford. The signing bonus was listed as $25,000, paid upon acceptance of the position. $25,000. That was more money than I'd ever had at one time in my entire life. That was every bill paid, every debt cleared, a safety net I'd never experienced. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to think clearly through the exhaustion, fear, and desperate, yet dangerous, hope. This was wrong, obviously wrong. You didn't get offered $95,000 and a $25,000 signing bonus for managing schedules and attending business functions. There was something else. Something darker, hiding beneath the professional language. Dante Moretti, I turned the name over in my mind, trying to place it. The last name was Italian, common enough, but something about the combination felt familiar in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. I opened my laptop again and searched for him, typing the name into Google with fingers that had steadied slightly. The results were surprisingly sparse for someone offering that kind of money. A few mentions in business journals from 2 or 3 years ago, discussing his expansion into commercial real estate. A society page photo from a charity gala, him in a tuxedo standing with people I didn't recognize, his face partially turned from the camera as if he'd deliberately avoided a clear shot. No social media presence, No personal information, nothing that revealed who he really was or where his money came from. I added search terms, Dante Moretti investigation, Dante Moretti criminal, and Dante Moretti arrest. Most returned nothing, but one result from a business forum made my stomach clench. A thread from 8 months ago. Someone asking if anyone had done business with Moretti Industries. The first few responses were positive, with professional interactions, contracts honored, and payments made on time. However, upon scrolling down, I found a comment that had been edited, with the original content removed but still visible in a cached version. Be very careful with Moretti. He has connections that make problems disappear permanently. A colleague of mine attempted to back out of a deal, and within a week his business failed. Permits were revoked, investors pulled out, and suppliers refused to work with him. Coincidence? Decide for yourself. The comment had been deleted within hours of posting, but it had been preserved in Google's cache, a warning from someone who'd learned to be afraid. I should have been terrified. I should have deleted the email and blocked Dante's number properly this time. Maybe I should have even called the police, though I had no idea what I'd tell them. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table as dawn light began filtering through my cheap curtains, and I thought about $95,000. About health insurance with zero deductible. About saying yes when Lily asked for things. Down the hall, I heard Lily's door open, her small feet padding toward the bathroom, the familiar sounds of our morning routine beginning. In an hour, I'd need to get her ready for school, pack her lunch with the cheapest options that would still keep her fed, and walk her to the bus stop wearing shoes that were developing a hole in the sole I couldn't afford to replace yet. I'd come back to this apartment and work my data entry job for 8 hours, making barely enough to keep us afloat, knowing that one unexpected expense, one emergency, one missed child support payment would sink us completely. Or I could seriously consider Dante Moretti's offer. I could read the contract thoroughly, ask questions, and try to understand what he really wanted from me. I could weigh the obvious dangers against the very real desperation of my current situation. I could make a choice that terrified me but might save us. My phone buzzed with a new text message, and I looked at it, expecting it to be from Dante. Instead, it was Derek, sent from a different number since I'd blocked his original one. Why aren't you answering? I need to discuss next month's payment with you. Things are tight right now, but I promise I'm good for it. The same excuses, the same broken promises, the same Derek who'd been failing us for 3 years and would continue failing us for the next 15 if nothing changed. I looked at his message, then at my laptop screen still showing Dante's employment contract, then at the closed door of Lily's room. 2 paths stretched before me, neither good, neither safe, but one offering something the other never would. Security, stability, and the ability to provide for my daughter the way she deserved. What kind of mother would I be if I didn't at least explore that possibility? What kind of mother would I be if I did? I heard Lily's bathroom door open, and I heard her calling for me. Her voice bright with the innocent expectation that her mother would be there, would take care of her, would somehow make everything okay. Despite impossible odds, I closed my laptop and went to her, pushing the decision away for a few more hours, knowing that avoiding it wouldn't make it disappear. Knowing that Dante Moretti, whoever he really was, whatever he really wanted, had already worked his way into my life through an accidentally sent text message at 2 a.m. Knowing that opportunities, especially ones that seemed too good to be true, usually came with prices that weren't immediately visible. The morning routine unfolded with mechanical precision, my hands going through familiar motions while my mind circled endlessly around Dante Moretti's offer. I made Lily's breakfast, which consisted of scrambled eggs and toast, and watched her eat while she chattered about a project at school. Something related to ecosystems and food chains that I should have been paying more attention to. She was wearing her favorite purple shirt, the one with a small stain near the collar that hadn't come out in the wash, and jeans that were getting too short in the legs. I needed to take her shopping for new clothes, another expense I'd been putting off, adding to the growing list of things we needed but couldn't quite afford. "Mommy, you're not listening," Lily said, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth, those observant 8-year-old eyes studying me with concern that made my chest ache. She shouldn't have to worry about me. Shouldn't have learned so young to read my moods and silences. I'm sorry, baby. Tell me again about the ecosystem. She launched back into her explanation. Something about producers, consumers, and decomposers, and I focused hard on her words, trying to be present and give her the attention she deserved. But the number 95,000 kept echoing in my head, a siren song of financial security that drowned out everything else. After I dropped Lily at school, watching her run toward the entrance with her too small backpack bouncing against her shoulders, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I walked to the public library 3 blocks from our apartment, needing to research Dante Moretti somewhere that didn't feel contaminated by his presence, somewhere with no possibility of him monitoring my searches. The paranoia was probably irrational, but after last night, I wasn't taking chances. The library was nearly empty at 9 a.m. on a Thursday, just a few elderly patrons reading newspapers and a homeless man sleeping in a corner chair that the librarians pretended not to notice. I claimed a computer in the back row and started searching with more focus than my late-night attempts had allowed. Dante Moretti's digital footprint was deliberately minimal, scrubbed clean in a way that required resources and intention. The few photos I found online never showed his face clearly, as they were always turned slightly away, shadowed, or partially obscured by other people. It was as if he'd made himself into a ghost, present but not quite visible, influential but not quite traceable. I tried searching for Moretti Industries, the company name from his email. The corporate website was sleek and professional, listing interests in import-export, commercial real estate, and private equity investments. The language was vague, the kind of descriptions that sounded legitimate but revealed nothing concrete. No employee directory, no office locations beyond a P.O. box, no details that would help me understand what the company actually did. Then I tried a different approach, searching for the charity gala where I'd found his photo. The event had been a fundraiser for a children's hospital, hosted by the Castellano Foundation. I recognized that name from news articles. It was a prominent family in the city with connections to everything from politics to construction to the restaurant industry. Old money mixed with new influence, the kind of family that appeared in society pages and donation lists, but rarely in investigative journalism. Cross-referencing Moretti with Castellano yielded a single result: a business filing from 6 years ago, which listed Moretti Industries as a minority investor in a Castellano development project. The connection was thin, possibly meaningless, but it suggested that Dante moved in circles where power was consolidated and protected, where business and politics, and possibly worse things, blurred together. I was so focused on my research, I didn't notice someone approaching until a shadow fell across my screen. I looked up to find a woman standing beside my computer station, maybe 60 years old, wearing an expensive coat that looked out of place in our neighborhood library. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having to check price tags. "Maya Santos," she said. Not a question, a statement delivered with certainty. My heart kicked into overdrive. Fight-or-flight instinct screamed. "Do I know you?" "No, but I know you. My employer sent me to deliver a message." She glanced at my computer screen, at the search results for Dante Moretti still visible, and smiled slightly. "I see you're doing your due diligence." "That's wise. Mr. Moretti appreciates thoroughness." I should have run, called for help, or done anything except sit there frozen while this stranger, who somehow knew my name, stood calmly discussing my research with her employer. "What message?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Mr. Moretti would like to meet with you this afternoon to discuss the position in detail. He understands you have questions and concerns, and he's prepared to address them all. A car will pick you up at 2 p.m. from your apartment." She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a cream-colored business card, placing it on the desk beside my keyboard. "His private number is on the back in case you need to reach him before then." "I haven't agreed to any meeting." "Haven't you? You're here researching him instead of dismissing his offer outright. You read the employment contract, calculated what the salary would mean for your daughter's future, and imagined what saying yes might feel like. You're already considering it, Maya. The meeting is just the next logical step." The accuracy of her assessment felt like a violation, like she'd reached into my head and pulled out thoughts I'd barely acknowledged to myself. "How did you even know I was here? Mr. Moretti knows many things. Where you go, who you talk to, and what concerns keep you awake at night. Don't look so frightened, dear. Knowledge is simply a tool, and Mr. Moretti's tools are more sophisticated than most." She adjusted her coat, preparing to leave. "The car will be a black sedan, license plate ending in 743. The driver's name is Vincent. He'll bring you to a restaurant in the financial district where you and Mr. Moretti can talk privately." "And if I refuse? If I'm not there at 2 p.m.? Her smile widened slightly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Then you'll continue your research, continue finding nothing, and continue wondering what you're missing. You'll go home to your apartment with the broken radiator and the mold in the bathroom ceiling that your landlord won't fix. You'll feed Lily dinner from the discount grocery store and tell her maybe when she asks about the art classes Jessica takes. And tomorrow you'll wake up to the same struggles, the same barely getting by existence. Except now you'll know there was an alternative you were too afraid to explore." She turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. Moretti doesn't make offers twice, Maya. This is your window. Close it, and it stays closed." I watched her walk away, her heels clicking on the library's tile floor, and looked down at the business card she'd left. Simple, elegant, just his name and a phone number embossed in black ink. On the back, handwritten in precise script, another number with a note. "For when you're ready to stop running." I flipped the card over repeatedly, my mind spinning. This was wild, all of it. Strange women tracking me to libraries, offers of life-changing money for vaguely defined work, and a man who seemed to know every detail of my life despite my having no memory of meeting him. Every rational instinct screamed at me to throw the card away, to go home and lock my doors and pretend this had never happened. But I didn't throw the card away. I slipped it into my pocket and closed my browser windows, erasing my search history with a few clicks that felt futile given Dante's apparent ability to monitor my every move. I left the library and walked home through streets that suddenly felt different, exposed as if every passing car might contain someone watching me, reporting back to Dante about where I had gone and what I had done. My apartment felt smaller when I returned to it, shabbier, the familiar space transformed by comparison to what was being offered. The broken radiator the woman had mentioned clanked and sputtered in the corner, fighting its usual losing battle against the autumn chill. The mold spot on the bathroom ceiling that I'd been meaning to address for months stared down at me accusingly. The stack of unpaid bills on my kitchen counter seemed to have grown overnight, multiplying like malignant cells. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at my kitchen table, the business card in front of me like a tarot card promising either salvation or damnation, depending on how you interpreted the symbols. At 1:30 p.m., I was still sitting there, having accomplished nothing work-wise, having made no decision, suspended in amber between fear and desperate hope. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "The car is on its way. We're something professional. This is a business meeting, not a social call." I looked at my closet, at the limited options hanging there. Professional meant the black pants with the worn knees and the blazer I'd bought from a thrift store 3 years ago for job interviews. It meant looking like exactly what I was, someone struggling to maintain an appearance of having their life together while everything crumbled around them. But I got dressed anyway, my hands moving through the motions while my mind remained elsewhere. I fixed my hair and applied the minimal makeup I owned, transforming myself into a version of Maya who looked employable, capable, like someone who belonged in business meetings with mysterious men who made problems disappear permanently. At 1:58 p.m., I stood at my living room window and watched a black sedan with a license plate ending in 743 pull up to the curb. A driver emerged, an older man with a professional bearing, and looked up at my building as if he could see me watching from the 4th floor. My phone buzzed again. "Vincent is waiting. Don't keep Mr. Moretti waiting too." I grabbed my purse, checked that I had my phone and keys, and walked to my door. My hand on the knob, I paused, giving myself one last chance to choose differently. I could stay here, stay safe, stay struggling. I could accept that life was hard and unfair, and some people were dealt hands that required playing with impossible odds. Or I could walk out this door and get in that car and see where this dangerous curiosity led. I thought about Lily, the shoes she needed, the classes she wanted, and the life she deserved. I thought about Derek's latest excuse text, the same broken record that would play for the next 15 years unless something fundamental changed. I thought about $95,000 in health insurance, and the ability to say yes instead of maybe someday. I opened the door and walked down the 4 flights of stairs, each step feeling like a commitment I couldn't take back. Vincent was waiting beside the sedan, holding the rear door open with the practiced patience of someone accustomed to nervous clients taking their time. "Ms. Santos," he said with a slight nod, his voice warm despite the formal greeting. "I'm Vincent. Mr. Moretti has asked me to ensure your comfort during the drive." I climbed into the back seat before I could reconsider, and the door closed with a solid thunk that sounded like finality. The interior smelled of leather and subtle cologne, the seats more comfortable than my bed at home. Vincent pulled smoothly into traffic, navigating the afternoon congestion with the ease of someone who'd made this drive 1,000 times. I watched my neighborhood slide past through tinted windows, the familiar streets taking on a dreamlike quality, as if I was already separating from the life I'd known, drifting towards something I couldn't yet define. We drove for 20 minutes, the buildings growing taller and sleeker as we entered the financial district. Old money architecture giving way to modern glass and steel towers that reflected the afternoon sun like mirrors. Vincent pulled up to a restaurant I recognized from magazine spreads, the kind of place I'd never imagined entering, where reservations required weeks of advance notice and entrees cost more than my weekly grocery budget. A valet appeared immediately, opening my door before I could reach for the handle. "Welcome to Aurelio, Ms. Santos. Mr. Moretti is waiting in the private dining room." I followed the hostess through a main dining area that was hushed and elegant, past tables occupied by people in expensive suits discussing deals and mergers in voices that never rose above cultured murmurs. We went down a corridor lined with wine storage, where bottles worth more than my car rested in temperature-controlled cases, and stopped at a door that the hostess opened with a deferential smile. "Enjoy your lunch." The room beyond was smaller than I had expected, intimate, with a single table set for 2 beside floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. And standing by those windows, backlit by the afternoon sun that made it hard to see his features clearly, was Dante Moretti. He turned as I entered, and I got my first clear look at the man who'd disrupted my life with a middle-of-the-night phone call and an offer that seemed too good to be true. He was younger than his voice had suggested, perhaps in his late 30s, with dark hair and features that suggested Italian heritage several generations back. Tall, well over 6 feet, wearing a charcoal suit that had definitely been tailored specifically for him. But it was his eyes that caught me, dark and intelligent and filled with an intensity that made me want to look away, and I couldn't quite manage it. "Maya," he said, my name and his voice sounding different than it had on the phone, warmer somehow, though no less dangerous. "Thank you for coming. I know this situation is irregular, and I appreciate your courage in facing it directly." I stayed near the door, every muscle tense and ready to run. "Your assistant didn't really give me much choice. She made it clear this was my only opportunity. Elena can be persuasive, but you always had a choice. You're here because some part of you wants to understand what I'm offering, wants to believe there might be a way out of the corner you've been backed into." He gestured to the table. "Please sit. We should eat while we discuss business. The food here is exceptional." I moved to the table but remained standing, gripping the back of the chair. "I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand how you know so much about me, or why you're interested in hiring someone you met for 3 minutes 4 months ago, or what you really want that's worth $95,000. Dante pulled out my chair in a gesture that was probably meant to be polite, but felt controlling given the circumstances. "Those are all excellent questions, and I intend to answer them fully. But first, let me address the most important concern you're not voicing. You're afraid of me, and you're right to be. I'm not a safe person, Maya. I operate in spaces where conventional morality becomes flexible, where problems are solved through means that you might find disturbing, where loyalty is rewarded generously and betrayal is punished absolutely. If you work for me, you'll be entering that world, and there's no pretending otherwise. The blunt honesty was somehow more frightening than comforting denials would have been. So why would I possibly agree to that? Because the alternative is worse. Not more dangerous, perhaps, but worse in the ways that matter to you. Staying in your current situation means watching Lily grow up with less than she deserves. Means emergency room visits you can't afford when her asthma flares. Means telling her no 1,000 times about things that should be simple yeses. It means Derek disappointing her for the next 15 years, meaning working yourself into exhaustion for wages that barely cover survival. That slow grinding down of hope and possibility, that's worse than any danger I represent. He sat down, leaving me still standing, and continued in that calm, measured voice. I'm offering you a way out. The work is real, the salary is real, and the benefits are real. You'd be my assistant in legitimate business dealings, handling my schedule, representing my interests at social functions, and managing correspondence and contracts. Nothing illegal in the job description. But something illegal in reality, I finished, finally sitting down because standing made me feel more vulnerable somehow. You said problems are solved through disturbing means. What does that mean exactly? A waiter appeared as if summoned telepathically, placing plates of food I didn't remember ordering in front of us. Some fish with vegetables that looked like art, accompanied by wine that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. When we were alone again, Dante picked up his fork but didn't eat, just held it, watching me. It means I have connections to people and organizations that operate outside conventional legal frameworks. It means when someone threatens my business or my people, I have resources to address those threats that don't involve lawyers or police. It means the money that pays your salary comes from ventures that exist in gray areas between legal and illegal. So, you're a criminal. The blunt statement hung between us, and I half expected him to be offended. Instead, he smiled slightly. I'm a businessman who understands that those with power write laws to protect their interests, and I've chosen to operate according to my own code rather than theirs. Criminal is a label applied by a system I don't respect, but if it helps you categorize me, then yes, by conventional definition, some of what I do would be considered criminal. I should have stood up, should have walked out, should have wanted nothing to do with this man who casually admitted to being exactly what I'd feared. Instead, I picked up my fork and took a bite of the fish, buying time while I processed. It was delicious, perfectly prepared, the kind of meal I'd never tasted before. What exactly would you need me to do? The real job, not the sanitized version in the contract. Observe, listen, attend functions where my presence would be too obvious or too threatening, and report back what you see and hear. I need someone who can move through social circles without drawing attention. Someone people underestimate. Someone smart enough to recognize what's important in seemingly casual conversations. He finally took a bite of his own food, the gesture somehow making this surreal situation feel more normal. You have a gift for being overlooked, Maya. People see a struggling single mother and make assumptions about your intelligence, your awareness, and your relevance. They talk freely around you because they don't consider you a threat. That's valuable. So I'd be a spy. You'd be my eyes and ears in places I can't easily access myself. Sometimes that means charity galas, sometimes business dinners, sometimes art openings like the one where we met. You'd dress appropriately, play the role of my professional assistant, and pay attention. No violence, no direct involvement in anything that would endanger you or Lily. But indirect involvement. Association with a criminal enterprise, which means legal risk if you get caught. Which I won't. I've been doing this for 15 years. Maya, and I've never been charged with anything. Never been seriously investigated. Never left evidence that could be traced back to me. I'm careful, methodical, and I protect my people absolutely. Work for me, and you'll have security you've never known, both financial and physical. He set down his fork and leaned forward slightly, his intensity ratcheting up. Derek won't bother you anymore because he'll understand there are consequences for harassing you. Your landlord will fix the mold and the radiator, because he'll receive a very persuasive visit from someone explaining the importance of maintaining your living conditions. Lily's school will have everything she needs because donations will flow from anonymous sources. Every aspect of your life that's currently difficult will become easier. The picture he painted was seductive, a fantasy of problems solved and burdens lifted. But the cost was my integrity, my safety, my daughter's exposure to a world where problems were solved through disturbing means and loyalty was enforced through fear. I need to think about it, I said, the words feeling inadequate but necessary. I need time to process what you're really asking. Of course. I don't expect an answer today. Take the weekend, consider carefully, and we'll talk Monday. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and slid it across the table. Inside is $5,000 cash. Consider it a good faith gesture, a demonstration that my offers are genuine. Use it however you need, no strings attached. I stared at the envelope, not daring to touch it. And if I decide no? What happens to that money? Keep it regardless. I told you, no strings. Whether you accept my offer or not, you and Lily deserve something better than what you currently have. If my money can provide that even in a small way, I consider it worthwhile. The generosity felt like a trap, like accepting would create an obligation I couldn't refuse. But I thought about my bank account, about the unpaid bills, about Lily's shoes and the field trip and the asthma medication, and my hand moved toward the envelope almost of its own accord. This doesn't mean I'm agreeing to anything. I know. It means you're desperate enough to accept help from a dangerous stranger, which I already knew. Take the money, Maya. Feed your daughter, pay your bills. Breathe a little easier for a few days while you decide whether to accept everything else I'm offering. I took the envelope, slipping it into my purse with hands that shook slightly, and hated myself for the relief that flooded through me at the weight of it. $5,000, enough to solve every immediate crisis, enough to buy myself breathing room I hadn't had in years. Dante watched me take it with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between satisfaction and understanding, as if he'd known exactly what I'd do before I did it myself. We finished the meal in relative silence, him making occasional small talk about the restaurant and the city that I responded to automatically while my mind spun in circles. The food was extraordinary, every bite a revelation of flavors I didn't have context for, but I barely tasted it. I was too aware of the envelope in my purse, of the man across from me who'd somehow identified my desperation and weaponized it with surgical precision, of the choice that wasn't really a choice being offered with such calculated generosity. When the plates were cleared and coffee appeared, Dante finally broke the comfortable quiet he'd allowed to stretch between us. You're wondering how I knew about the conversation with Lily, about the Science Museum. You've been running through possibilities, trying to determine if I've bugged your apartment or hacked your phone or somehow have access to your private moments. I had been wondering exactly that, and his accuracy made my skin crawl. Have you? No, nothing so invasive or illegal. I simply have relationships with people throughout this city, people who work in buildings and schools and shops, people who mention things they overhear in the normal course of their days. Your building superintendent, for instance, is a retired police officer who does security consulting for several of my properties. He mentioned hearing you and Lily discussing the museum through the air vents while he was fixing Mrs. Patterson's radiator. He wasn't spying, just existing in a space where conversations carry, and he mentioned it because he knows I collect information. The explanation was somehow worse than surveillance would have been. It meant my entire life was already exposed, already visible to anyone paying attention, and Dante had simply been the first person to actually look. That's horrifying. You realize that's horrifying, right? It's reality, Maya. You've been living in a fishbowl your entire life, assuming privacy that doesn't actually exist, protected only by the fact that you weren't interesting enough for anyone to watch closely. I'm simply the first person to point out the glass. He sipped his coffee, the gesture casual and controlled. Working for me doesn't make you more exposed. It just makes that exposure purposeful and protected. The difference is significant. Protected how? Right now, Derek knows where you live and could show up anytime he wants. He knows Lily's school schedule, knows when you're alone, knows exactly how vulnerable you are. I could change that in a day. New apartment in a building with actual security. Private school for Lily with background checks on anyone who comes near her. A driver to handle transportation so you're never walking exposed on streets. Protection isn't just about solving problems after they occur. It's about preventing them from occurring in the first place. The offer was seductive, painting a picture of safety I'd never been able to provide on my own. But it was safety purchased through association with danger, a devil's bargain dressed in expensive suits and good intentions. What happens if I say no? After taking your money, after this meeting, if I decide I can't do this, what then? Dante set down his coffee cup and looked at me with those dark, intense eyes that seemed to see straight through whatever defenses I was trying to maintain. Then nothing happens. I meant what I said about the money, no strings attached. You walk away and I disappear from your life as completely as I entered it. You'll never hear from me again. I don't believe that. People like you don't just let go once they've established a connection. People like me? His smile held genuine amusement. You mean criminals? Mafia bosses? Whatever category you've put me in based on half-formed research and reasonable fear? The accuracy of my unspoken thoughts made me flush. Yes, exactly that. People who solve problems through disturbing means don't typically accept rejection gracefully. You're right. Generally, we don't. But I'm also pragmatic. Maya, forcing your cooperation would be counterproductive. I need someone I can trust absolutely. Someone whose loyalty is genuine even if it's purchased. Coerced loyalty is worthless. It breaks the moment a better offer appears or the threat lessens. I need you to choose this freely, with full understanding of what you're choosing, or not at all. He leaned back in his chair, the posture relaxed, but his gaze never wavering from mine. If you say no, I lose a potential asset, but I maintain my reputation as someone who honors his word. That reputation is worth more than whatever benefit forcing your compliance would provide. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that rejection was actually an option. But trust and Dante Moretti seemed like contradictory concepts, oil and water that couldn't mix no matter how much you shook the container. I need to pick up Lily from school in an hour, I said, checking my phone and using the excuse to break eye contact, to create some distance from the intensity of his attention. Vincent will take you wherever you need to go, but before you leave, I want to give you something else to consider. He withdrew a folder from the briefcase I hadn't noticed sitting beside his chair and slid it across the table. Inside is information about Derek. Where he's actually been living, what he's actually been doing, why the child support has been so sporadic. I think you'll find it illuminating. I opened the folder reluctantly, not sure I wanted to know, but unable to resist the pull of information. Inside were photographs, bank statements, police reports, a comprehensive dossier on my ex-husband's life that made my stomach turn as I flipped through the pages. Derek wasn't staying at cheap motels because money was tight. He was staying at cheap motels because he was spending money on gambling, on a girlfriend I didn't know he had, on a lifestyle that prioritized his wants over his daughter's needs. The bank statements showed regular deposits from under-the-table construction work he'd never reported, income that should have been garnished for child support, but wasn't because he'd hidden it. The police reports detailed 2 arrests for drunk and disorderly conduct in the past 6 months, both dismissed with minimal fines, both occurring on weekends when he was supposed to have visitation with Lily. He's been lying about everything, I whispered. The evidence laid out in black and white making denials impossible, not just excuses, actual deliberate lies about his whole situation. Yes, he's prioritized his comfort and pleasure over his daughter's welfare for 3 years, and he'll continue doing so for the next 15 unless something forces a change. Child support enforcement is a joke in this state, you know that. You could spend years in court chasing money he'll keep hiding. Or you could work for me and have resources that make his cooperation irrelevant. Dante's voice was gentle, sympathetic even, but the manipulation was clear. He was showing me Derek's failures to make his own offer seem reasonable by comparison. You're trying to make me angry enough to stop thinking clearly. I'm giving you information you deserve to have, information that affects your daughter's welfare. What you do with that anger is your choice. But yes, I want you angry, Maya. I want you furious at the system that's failed you, at the man who's betrayed his own child, at the situation that's forced you to consider offers from dangerous strangers. Anger clarifies, burns away the hesitation and doubt, helps you see what really matters. He was right, and I hated him for it. The anger was clarifying, stripping away the moral hesitation and leaving only the brutal calculus of survival. Derek would never change, the system would never force him to change, and waiting for either was sentencing Lily to 15 more years of disappointment and financial instability. "I need to go," I said abruptly, closing the folder and standing up. "I need to think, and I can't do that with you sitting here telling me exactly what I want to hear in exactly the right way to make me stop questioning it." Dante stood as well, smoothing his suit jacket. "Of course. Vincent is waiting downstairs. He'll take you to Lily's school and then home or anywhere else you need to go. My number is in your phone now, saved under my actual name. Call when you've made your decision." I turned toward the door, then paused. "Why me? Really? You could hire professional investigators, people with actual experience in corporate espionage or whatever this is. Why go to such elaborate lengths to recruit a broke single mother with no relevant skills?" For the first time, Dante's controlled expression shifted into something more genuine, a flash of honesty that felt less calculated than everything else he'd shown me. Because professionals know their value and negotiate accordingly. Because experience brings cynicism and agenda. Because I need someone who hasn't been corrupted by this world yet, someone who still believes in protecting their child above everything else, someone whose loyalty I can earn through demonstrated care rather than purchase through simple payment. He moved closer, not touching me but near enough that I could smell his cologne, subtle and expensive. "You remind me of someone I used to know, someone who made hard choices because soft ones weren't available, someone who survived through determination and love even when the world conspired against them. I want to help you, Maya. Yes, it serves my purposes, but it's also genuine. Both things can be true simultaneously." The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard, humanizing him in a way I wasn't prepared for. It would have been easier if he'd remained the calculating criminal, the dangerous stranger offering blood money. But this glimpse of something genuine, something almost wounded beneath the controlled exterior, complicated the simple narrative I'd been trying to construct. I left without responding, not trusting my voice, and found Vincent waiting exactly where Dante had said he'd be. The drive to Lily's school passed in silence, my mind replaying the entire conversation, analyzing every word for hidden manipulation while simultaneously recognizing the truth in most of what he'd said. Vincent pulled up to the school just as children began streaming out, and I spotted Lily immediately, her purple shirt visible in the crowd, her face lighting up when she saw me waiting. "Mommy, you're early," she said, climbing into the back seat beside me, her backpack hitting the leather with a thud. "And this is a fancy car. Did you get a new job?" Out of the mouths of children, I thought, the innocent question cutting straight to the heart of everything I was wrestling with. "Just borrowed it for the afternoon, baby. How was school?" She launched into a detailed account of her day, something about a substitute teacher and a bee that had gotten into the classroom, and I let her words wash over me while Vincent navigated back toward our apartment. When we pulled up to our building, Lily stared at the sedan with wide eyes. "Are you sure you have to give it back?" "It's really nice, I'm sure." "Thank you, Vincent," I added, meeting his eyes in the rearview mirror. He nodded once, professional and kind, and I wondered what he thought about all this. What he knew about Dante's business, whether he judged the desperate women his boss recruited with $5,000 good faith gestures. Inside our apartment, the shabbiness seemed more pronounced after an afternoon in Dante's world. The water stain on the ceiling had spread slightly, I noticed. The radiator clanked and sputtered its familiar complaint. The stack of bills on the counter seemed to have grown taller, though I knew that was just perception colored by the weight of the envelope in my purse. I made Lily a snack and set her up with homework at the kitchen table while I retreated to my bedroom, closing the door and sitting on my bed with the envelope. $5,000 in $100 bills, crisp and new, more cash than I'd ever held at once. I counted it twice, some part of me expecting it to disappear or transform into play money. but it remained stubbornly real. This much would pay 3 months of rent, cover the electric bill and the water bill and the internet bill, buy Lily new shoes and clothes that actually fit, refill her asthma medication without fighting insurance, maybe even put some aside for the Science Museum membership she wanted. Or I could refuse Dante's offer and return it. Maintain my integrity and my independence and my moral high ground while Lily wore 2 small jeans, and I rationed her medication, and we continued the slow slide toward a crisis one unexpected expense would trigger. The choice should have been obvious. Integrity over money, safety over risk, the moral high ground over association with admitted criminals. But sitting on my bed counting $100 bills while my daughter did homework in a kitchen that smelled like mold and desperation, the obvious choice felt impossible to make. My phone buzzed, and I looked at it expecting Dante. Instead, it was Derek, still texting from his alternative number. "I heard you had a fancy lunch today. Moving up in the world? Don't forget about the little people who helped get you there. Speaking of which, I really need to talk about next month's payment." The message made my blood run cold. How did Derek know about lunch? Had he been watching me, following me? Or was this city really as small and transparent as Dante had suggested, information flowing through networks I didn't understand to people who bothered to listen? I typed back before thinking better of it. "How do you know where I was?" The response was immediate. "I know lots of things, Maya. Like, I know you're struggling, and I know you're scared, and I know you're probably considering some options that aren't smart. Be careful who you get involved with. Not everyone who offers help actually has your best interests at heart." The irony of Derek lecturing me about other people's motives would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. I opened the folder Dante had given me and took photos of several pages. The bank statements showing Derek's hidden income, the police reports from his arrests, evidence of his systematic lying about his financial situation. Then I sent them to him without comment. His typing indicator appeared and disappeared multiple times, and I could almost feel his panic through the phone, scrambling for explanations or excuses. Finally, a message appeared. "Where did you get that? That's private information. You can't just invade someone's privacy like that." I laughed out loud, the sound harsh and slightly hysterical. Derek was worried about privacy invasion while he'd apparently been keeping tabs on my movements, while he'd been hiding income that should have supported his daughter, while he'd been lying for 3 years about why he couldn't fulfill his basic obligations. "Stop texting me," I typed. "Stop following me. Stop pretending you care about what's smart or what's in my best interests. You lost the right to have opinions about my choices when you decided a girlfriend and gambling were more important than your daughter." I blocked his new number before he could respond. And this time I triple-checked to make sure I'd actually blocked the right contact. Then I sat in my bedroom listening to Lily humming while she worked on her homework, and I thought about Dante's question. When was the last time I'd said yes when Lily asked for something she wanted, not needed, just wanted? I couldn't remember. Every request was filtered through the brutal calculus of our budget. Everything weighed against rent and bills and survival. She'd stopped asking for most things, I realized with a pang of guilt. She'd learned to minimize her wants, to make herself smaller and less demanding, to protect me from having to say no. What kind of childhood was that? What kind of lesson was I teaching her about her own worth, her right to take up space and want things and expect the people who loved her to care about those wants? At 5:30, I called her into my room and asked her to sit on the bed beside me. She bounced onto the mattress, her earlier energy from school still radiating off her in waves. "Am I in trouble?" "No, baby. The opposite, actually. I want to talk to you about some changes that might be happening." Her eyes went wide with the particular anxiety children get when adults use that serious tone. "Are we moving? Are you sick? Is Daddy coming back?" The progression of her fears broke my heart. Moving meant instability. Sick meant loss. Daddy coming back meant disappointment, not hope. What had we done to her, Derek and I, with our dysfunction and failure? None of those things. I might have a new job opportunity, something that would pay better and give us more security. It would mean some adjustments, maybe a new apartment in a safer neighborhood, possibly a new school for you with better programs. Her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "Really? Like the school Jessica goes to with the art program? Maybe yes. But I need to think very carefully about whether to take this job, because it would be working for someone very powerful and very demanding. It might mean I have to travel sometimes, or attend events in the evenings. You'd be safe and cared for, probably by Mrs. Patterson or someone similar, but I'd be busier than I am now. Lily processed this with the seriousness she'd learned too young, weighing factors she shouldn't have to consider. Would you be happy? At this job? The question surprised me. I'd expected her to ask about the art program, about the new apartment, about all the material improvements. Instead, she'd gone straight to the heart of what mattered. I don't know, sweetheart. I think I'd be good at it, and I think it would solve a lot of our problems. But happy is complicated. Lily leaned against me, her small body warm and trusting, and wrapped her arms around my waist. Mrs. Chen says happiness isn't something you find, it's something you decide. She told us that in class when Marcus was crying about not making the soccer team. The wisdom from an 8-year-old's teacher, filtered through my daughter's innocent interpretation, hit harder than any of Dante's carefully constructed arguments. Happiness as a decision, not a discovery. Security as a foundation for that decision, not a replacement for it. Mrs. Chen sounds very wise, I said, kissing the top of Lily's head, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo mixed with the playground smell of fresh air and childhood. I'll think about that while I'm deciding about the job. After Lily went to bed that night, I spread the contents of Dante's folder across my kitchen table, alongside the $5,000 in cash. On one side, evidence of Derek's betrayal and the system's failure to protect us. On the other, money that could solve immediate problems but came tethered to a world I didn't fully understand. I opened my laptop and did something I should have done from the beginning. I searched for Elena, the woman who'd tracked me to the library. Adding her description and Dante's name brought up a single result. A society page photo from 2 years ago showing a fundraiser for arts education. In the background, partially visible, was the silver-haired woman in her expensive coat. Standing beside a man the caption identified as Dante Moretti, philanthropist and private equity investor. Philanthropist. The word sat uneasily next to everything else I knew about him. I clicked through to the Arts Education Organization's website and found Dante listed as a founding donor. His contributions funding programs that brought music and art instruction to underfunded schools throughout the city. More searching revealed his name attached to children's hospital wings, scholarship funds for single parents pursuing higher education, grants for domestic violence shelters. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. How could someone who solved problems through disturbing means, who operated in gray areas between legal and illegal, also be funding art programs for poor kids and scholarships for struggling parents? But maybe that was the point. Maybe people weren't simple categories, weren't purely good or purely evil, but complicated mixtures of both depending on context and choice. Maybe Dante Moretti was genuinely trying to help people while also running criminal enterprises, both truths existing simultaneously without canceling each other out. I pulled up the employment contract he'd sent and read it thoroughly this time, looking for hidden clauses or concerning language. The terms were actually generous beyond the salary: 4 weeks paid vacation, comprehensive health insurance starting immediately upon acceptance, a discretionary bonus structure tied to performance, even an education fund that would cover college tuition for dependent children. That last benefit made me pause. College tuition for Lily, guaranteed, regardless of what happened with my employment. Dante had thought of everything, had anticipated every objection and addressed it with calculated precision. The contract was designed to be irresistible to someone in my position, and the transparency of that manipulation didn't make it any less effective. At midnight, I was still sitting at my kitchen table, no closer to a decision than I'd been that afternoon. The rational part of my brain kept screaming warnings about the danger, the legal exposure, the moral compromise. But the part of me that had been ground down by 3 years of struggling, the part that was tired and scared and desperate, kept calculating what $95,000 in health insurance and security would mean. My phone buzzed with a new message, and this time it actually was Dante. I know you're still awake, probably sitting at your kitchen table trying to logic your way through an emotional decision. Stop thinking for a moment and ask yourself what you feel. What does your instinct tell you? I stared at the message, unsettled by his accuracy about my physical location and current activity. My instinct tells me you're dangerous and I should run far and fast, I typed back. Good instincts. But they're also telling you something else, or you'd have already decided to refuse. What's the other message you're not acknowledging? I set the phone down and closed my eyes, trying to access whatever instinct he was referring to beneath the fear and rational objection. What did I actually feel, stripped of should and ought and proper? I felt tired. Tired of fighting alone, tired of being strong, tired of making impossible choices with inadequate resources. I felt angry at Derek for his selfishness, angry at a system that protected men like him while punishing women like me, angry at circumstances that made Dante's offer seem reasonable. And underneath those louder emotions, I felt something quieter but more persistent. Hope. Dangerous. Fragile hope that maybe there was a way out. Maybe I didn't have to do this alone anymore. Maybe someone with resources and power might actually use them to help rather than harm. I picked up my phone and typed the truth before I could reconsider. My instinct tells me you're offering me a life raft while standing in the boat that caused the shipwreck. But I'm drowning either way, so maybe the ethics of the rescue matter less than the fact of it. His response came after a longer pause than usual. That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in years. The boat metaphor is apt. Though I'd argue I didn't cause your shipwreck, I'm just the first person to notice you drowning and throw you a line. But your point stands. I'm not a good person, Maya. I'm not your savior or your hero. I'm a pragmatist who's identified a mutually beneficial arrangement and has the resources to make it happen. Then another message. The question isn't whether I'm good or bad. The question is whether you can live with the compromise required to accept my help. That's something only you can answer. He was right, and I hated how often he was right. This wasn't about him. Wasn't about whether Dante Moretti deserved my trust or respect. This was about me, about what I could live with, what I was willing to do to give my daughter the stability and security she deserved. I looked around my shabby apartment, at the mold on the ceiling and the stack of bills and the evidence of Derek's betrayal spread across my table. Then I looked at the closed door of Lily's bedroom, behind which she slept peacefully, trusting that her mother would somehow figure out how to take care of her, how to make everything okay despite impossible odds. What was I willing to do? What line wouldn't I cross? If Dante had asked me to do something directly illegal, something violent or explicitly harmful, the answer would have been easy. But he wasn't asking that. He was asking me to observe and report, to be his eyes and ears in social situations, to leverage my invisibility as a struggling single mother to gather information. Was that really so different from the corporate espionage that happened in boardrooms every day? The networking and relationship building that was considered standard business practice? Or was I just rationalizing, finding excuses to justify a choice I'd already emotionally made? I typed a message and deleted it 3 times before finally settling on something that felt honest. I need to meet with you again before I decide. I need to ask questions without the performance of an expensive restaurant and private dining rooms. Somewhere public, normal, where I can think clearly. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., the coffee shop 2 blocks from your apartment. The one you walk past every day, because their prices are triple what you can justify spending. I'll buy you that overpriced coffee and you can ask me anything you want. The specificity about the coffee shop I walked past daily should have frightened me more than it did. Instead, it just confirmed what I already knew. Dante had been watching me for months, learning my patterns and routines, waiting for an opportunity to make contact. The accidentally sent text message hadn't created his interest. It had just provided him with an excuse to act on interest that already existed. 9 a.m., I confirmed, then added, and I'm buying my own coffee. I don't need you purchasing everything. Fair enough. Though for what it's worth, I was planning to buy coffee for both of us regardless of whether you're the one paying. It's the principle that matters to you, and I respect that. I put my phone away and gathered up the evidence about Derek, tucking it back into the folder. The $5,000 I counted one more time, then locked in the small fireproof safe I kept in my closet, the one that currently held our birth certificates and social security cards and not much else. Having that much cash in my possession felt dangerous, like it would burn a hole through whatever it touched, but I also wasn't ready to deposit it or spend it or commit to keeping it. Tomorrow I'd meet Dante at the coffee shop, ask my questions, and make a final decision. Tonight I'd try to sleep, though I suspected that would prove impossible with my mind spinning through scenarios and consequences and the weight of choice pressing down on me like physical force. I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay in bed watching shadows shift across my ceiling, listening to the building settle and creak around me, thinking about all the small moments that had led to this point. The fight with Derek 3 years ago that had ended our marriage. The job interview that had landed me data entry work that barely paid survival wages. The gallery opening I'd attended because my boss was sick. The exhausted mistake that had sent a text to the wrong contact. 1,000 small choices and accidents, each one seeming insignificant at the time, but collectively forming a path that led directly to Dante Moretti's offer and the impossible decision it represented. At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and made coffee, standing at my kitchen window watching the city wake up. Delivery trucks rumbled past, early morning joggers huffed along sidewalks, the world continuing its normal rotation while mine tilted dangerously off axis. I got Lily ready for school with mechanical precision, packing her lunch and helping her find her library book, and making conversation that probably sounded normal, but felt performative. She studied me over breakfast with those 2 observant eyes. "You look tired, Mommy." "Couldn't sleep." "Adult brain wouldn't turn off." She nodded sagely, as if she understood, and returned her attention to her cereal. At 8:30, after dropping Lily at school, I walked the 2 blocks to the coffee shop I'd passed hundreds of times. It was called Mavericks, a local place that roasted their own beans and charged prices that reflected their artisanal approach. I'd never been inside, had only looked through the windows at people who could afford $4 lattes, and thought about a life where such things were casual rather than prohibitive. Dante was already there, sitting at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance, wearing jeans and a casual sweater that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, but made him look approachable, almost normal. He stood as I approached, a gesture of courtesy that felt antiquated and charming despite everything else. "Maya, thank you for meeting me. What would you like?" I glanced at the menu board behind the counter, at prices that still made me wince even knowing I had $5,000 locked in my closet. "Just a regular coffee. Black. The Brazilian single origin is excellent if you'd like to try something different. Black coffee is fine." I wasn't ready to accept his recommendations. Wasn't ready to let him guide even small decisions. He ordered for both of us, paid despite my protest, and returned to the table with 2 ceramic mugs that steamed gently in the morning light streaming through the windows. The coffee was exceptional, smooth and rich with notes I didn't have vocabulary to describe. So different from the cheap grocery store brand I made at home that it barely seemed like the same beverage. "You have questions," Dante said after giving me a moment to appreciate the coffee. "Ask them. No performance, no manipulation, just honest answers to whatever concerns you have." I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, gathering my thoughts. The people whose problems you make disappear. What happens to them? He didn't flinch from the directness. That depends on the problem and the person. Sometimes disappearing means relocating them somewhere they can't cause further issues, with financial incentive to stay relocated. Sometimes it means legal pressure applied through channels they can't trace back to me, lawsuits or investigations or audits that occupy their attention. Sometimes it means social pressure, information leaked that destroys their credibility or relationships. And sometimes, I pressed, needing to hear him say it, sometimes it means violence. Not often, and never as a first option, but sometimes the only language certain people understand is physical consequence. I won't lie to you about that, Maya. I've authorized actions that resulted in people being hurt, and I've done so without losing sleep over it because those people represented genuine threats to things I value. The honesty was brutal and somehow reassuring. At least he wasn't pretending to be something he wasn't. wasn't coding the reality in euphemisms that would let me pretend ignorance. And if I work for you, would I ever be asked to participate in that violence? No, your role would be purely observational and social. You attend events, you listen, you report back. The actions taken based on that information would be completely separate from your involvement. You'd have plausible deniability about anything that happened afterward. Plausible deniability isn't the same as actual innocence. No, it's not. If you work for me, you'll be complicit in things you might find morally questionable. That's the compromise I mentioned. You get security and resources, I get information and access, and the cost is your ability to claim complete ethical purity. That's the trade. I sipped my coffee, processing. What about Lily? What happens to her if I'm arrested? If something goes wrong? If your plausible deniability turns out to be not so plausible? If you're arrested, which won't happen because I'm very careful, but hypothetically if it did, Lily would be cared for. I'd provide a trust fund guaranteeing her financial security through college. Ensure she's placed with family or trusted guardians of your choosing, and fund the best legal defense available to get you released. Your daughter would never suffer for your association with me. You can't guarantee that. I can guarantee I'll use every resource at my disposal to prevent it. That's the best assurance anyone can offer in an uncertain world. Maya, I protect my people absolutely, and if you work for me, you and Lily become my people. The possessiveness in his phrasing should have alarmed me more than it did. Instead, it felt almost comforting. The idea of being claimed by someone with power to back up that claim. Why do you care, really? You said I remind you of someone, but that's not enough to explain this level of investment in recruiting me. Dante was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the morning street traffic, his expression distant. My mother raised me alone. My father was around but not present, involved in business that kept him absent or distracted. She worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed, sacrificed everything to give me opportunities she'd never had. She died when I was 19, exhausted herself to death essentially, her body just giving up after years of stress and inadequate medical care and running herself into the ground. He returned his attention to me, and I saw something raw in his eyes that hadn't been there before. I built everything I have, all of this, with the thought that I wish someone had helped her. Wish someone with resources had noticed her struggling and offered a way out before it was too late. I can't help her now, but I can help people like her, people like you, who are drowning in systems designed to exhaust them. That's not altruism, it's exorcising ghosts. The vulnerability in the admission made him human in a way all his calculated arguments hadn't. This wasn't just business strategy or criminal empire building. This was personal. Rooted in loss and regret, and the particular pain of watching someone you love destroy themselves through circumstances they couldn't control. I'm sorry about your mother, I said quietly, meaning it. Don't be sorry, be smart. Learn from her mistake, which was trying to do everything alone because she thought accepting help made her weak or obligated. It doesn't. It makes you strategic. He finished his coffee and set the mug down with deliberate care. I'm offering you help, yes, with strings attached because nothing is ever truly free. But the strings are transparent, the terms are clear, and the benefit is real. You work for me, gather information at social functions, maintain absolute discretion, and in return you get security and resources to build a better life for yourself and Lily. That's the deal. And if I decide I want out eventually, if I do this for a year or 2 and then want to stop, then we negotiate your exit. I'd prefer advance notice to train a replacement, and I'd expect continued discretion about anything you learned while working for me. But I don't keep people prisoner. You'd leave with a generous severance, strong references for whatever career you pursued next, and my continued protection for you and Lily. Former employees who've honored their commitments remain part of my circle, just in different capacities. The escape clause he was offering sounded too good to be true, but his directness so far suggested he meant it. I need 1 more day to sit with this, to make sure I'm thinking clearly and not just reacting out of desperation. Take the time you need. But Maya, understand that desperation isn't a disqualification from making good decisions. Sometimes desperation provides clarity that comfort obscures. Sometimes the choices we make under pressure are the most honest ones we'll ever make. He stood, preparing to leave, then paused. The $5,000 I gave you yesterday. Whether you accept my offer or not, spend it. Buy Lily the shoes she needs, pay your bills, take her to that science museum. Let yourself experience what it feels like to say yes without calculating the cost. Consider it data gathering for your decision. After he left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, ordering a second cup of that exceptional coffee and watching people come and go. Professionals grabbing lattes before work, students with laptops camped at tables, retirees reading newspapers, all of them moving through their normal lives unaware that someone at a corner table was deciding whether to cross a line she'd never be able to uncross. I left the coffee shop and walked without destination, my feet carrying me through neighborhoods that shifted from commercial to residential, past parks where mothers pushed strollers and old men played chess, through streets where my problems seemed both crushingly immediate and abstractly distant. The weight of decision pressed down on me with physical force, making each step feel heavier than the last. At a small park 3 blocks from Lily's school, I sat on a bench and watched children play on equipment that had seen better days, their laughter carrying across the worn grass and cracked pavement. These were kids like Lily, growing up in circumstances that required resilience they shouldn't need to develop so young, learning to make themselves smaller to fit into spaces that didn't quite accommodate them. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, approached the swing set only to find all the swings occupied. She stood there patiently waiting, not asking anyone to share, not demanding her turn, just accepting that waiting was what kids like her did. When a swing finally opened up, her face lit with a joy so pure and uncomplicated it made my chest ache. That joy over something as simple as an available swing, something children in better neighborhoods took for granted, never had to wait for, never had to earn. Was that Lily's future if I stayed the course? Learning to wait patiently for scraps, to celebrate small victories, to make peace with less than she deserved? Or was I projecting my own fears onto a childhood that might be happier than my adult anxiety allowed me to recognize? My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. Lily left her lunchbox at home this morning. I noticed when I saw her in the hallway. I packed her an extra sandwich if you'd like me to drop it at the school. The kindness of neighbors who'd noticed my daughter's needs and filled gaps without being asked, that was also part of our reality. We weren't completely alone, weren't entirely without support, even if that support came in modest forms like shared sandwiches and babysitting at discount rates. But kindness, however genuine, didn't pay for asthma medication or prevent the electric company from disconnecting service. Kindness didn't solve structural problems or change the fundamental equation of insufficient resources trying to meet necessary expenses. I texted back my thanks and told Mrs. Patterson I'd already ordered lunch delivery for Lily, a lie but one that saved everyone's pride. Then I did something impulsive, something I'd never have done before yesterday. I called the school and actually arranged lunch delivery from a local deli, using money from the $5,000 Dante had given me, making my lie retroactively true. $15 for a sandwich and fruit and a cookie, an extravagance I'd never have justified before, but Dante's words echoed in my mind. Let yourself experience what it feels like to say yes without calculating the cost. The rest of the day passed in a blur of errands I'd been putting off. I went to the pharmacy and refilled Lily's asthma medication without checking my bank balance first. Without calling insurance to fight about prior authorization, just handed over Dante's cash and accepted the prescription. $60 that would have required a week of anxiety and calculations suddenly became simple, a problem solved with paper instead of stress. I bought Lily new shoes, not from the discount store where I usually shopped, but from an actual children's shoe store, where a patient employee measured her feet properly and recommended styles designed for growing children. $48 that came with a guarantee and proper arch support, and the knowledge that I wasn't making her wear shoes that hurt because cheaper options required sacrifice. I paid the electric bill and the water bill and the internet bill, watching numbers decrease in my safe and increase in my peace of mind. Bills that had loomed like existential threats became merely administrative tasks, problems money could solve when you actually had money to deploy. By the time I picked Lily up from school, I'd spent 800 of the 5,000, and something in my chest had loosened incrementally. Some chronic tension I'd carried so long I'd stopped noticing it until its absence created space for deeper breathing. Lily bounded out of school with more energy than usual. "Mommy, someone sent me lunch today. A really good sandwich with turkey and avocado, and there was a chocolate chip cookie that was still warm. Do you know who sent it?" I crouched down to her level, brushing hair from her face. "I sent it, baby. I wanted you to have something special." Her eyes went wide. "Really? That must have cost a lot. Are we rich now?" The question, asked with such innocent hope, made me laugh despite everything. "Not rich, sweetheart. But things might be getting a little easier. How would you feel about some changes? Maybe a new apartment in a safer neighborhood. Maybe a new school with better programs. Would Jessica be at the new school?" Trust a child to focus on what actually mattered, not better programs or safer neighborhoods, but whether her best friend would still be accessible. Probably not the same school, but you could still see Jessica on weekends and after school. And the new school might have programs you'd really like. Art classes, maybe music, things like that. Lily considered this seriously, weighing friendship against opportunity with the wisdom of someone forced to make such calculations too young. "Could I try it and go back if I don't like it?" "Probably not, baby. This would be a permanent change, something we'd commit to. So I need you to think carefully about whether you'd be okay with that." We walked home hand in hand, Lily chattering about her day while I processed the enormity of what I was contemplating. Changing schools meant accepting Dante's offer, meant committing to his world and everything it entailed. There was no trying it out, no provisional arrangement. Once I stepped through that door, it would close behind me. At home, I made dinner, actual groceries I'd bought without checking prices. And we ate together at our small kitchen table while Lily told me about the substitute teacher in the B and a boy named Marcus who'd cried about soccer tryouts. Normal childhood dramas, small disappointments and minor triumphs, the ordinary texture of growing up. After dinner, after homework and bath time and stories, after Lily finally fell asleep clutching her new stuffed animal, a impulse purchase from the shoe store that I'd never have allowed myself before, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and looked at my bank account. $347, unchanged from yesterday because I'd spent Dante's cash instead of my own money. That number, that impossible balance that barely covered a week of expenses, was my reality without intervention. But on my table sat the remainder of Dante's $5,000, $4,200 that had already transformed my week, that had let me say yes to Lily about lunch and shoes and a stuffed animal, that had paid bills without the usual accompanying dread. And in my email sat a contract offering $95,000 annually, health insurance, security, stability, all the things I'd been desperately trying to provide through determination alone and failing despite my best efforts. I opened my phone and pulled up Dante's contact, my finger hovering over the call button. Once I made this call, once I spoke the words that would accept his offer, there would be no taking them back. I'd be stepping into his world, accepting his protection and his resources and his expectations, becoming complicit in whatever gray area operations funded those resources. But I'd also be giving Lily the childhood she deserved, the one where she didn't have to wait patiently for swings or make herself smaller, or learn resignation before she learned multiplication. I'd be saying yes to art classes and science museums and asthma medication without rationing, to a future where her potential wasn't limited by my paycheck. The choice, when I finally made it, felt both monumental and inevitable. I pressed call. Dante answered on the second ring, his voice warm and unsurprised, as if he'd been expecting this. "Maya, have you made your decision?" "I have. I want to accept your offer, with some conditions." "I'm listening." I could hear the slight shift in his tone, interest sharpening into focus. "What conditions?" "First, Lily's safety is non-negotiable. Whatever information I gather, whatever situations I'm placed in, she never becomes leverage, never becomes a target, never gets pulled into your world beyond the material benefits. If anyone threatens her because of my association with you, I walk away immediately and you ensure we disappear completely. Agreed. That was already my intention, but I appreciate you stating it explicitly. What else? I paced my small kitchen, my free hand gesturing though he couldn't see me. Second, I need veto power over assignments. If you ask me to attend a function or gather information in a situation that feels dangerous or compromises my values beyond what I can reconcile, I can refuse without penalty. There was a longer pause this time. That's more complicated. There may be situations where I need specific information that only you can access, where refusal would compromise larger operations, but I'm willing to agree that you can refuse assignments that put you in physical danger, and we'll discuss concerns about other types of situations case by case. Compromise rather than absolute veto power. It was less than I wanted, but more than I'd expected. Acceptable. Third condition, everything regarding finances and benefits has to be documented legally. I want contracts, pay stubs, tax documentation, everything above board to the extent possible. If this goes wrong, I'm not getting caught for tax evasion on top of everything else. Dante's laugh was genuine, warm with what sounded like respect. You've been researching what takes people down. Smart. Yes, everything will be properly documented. You'll be a legitimate employee of Moretti Industries with all appropriate paperwork. The contracts I sent you were drafted by actual attorneys and are legally binding. Fourth, I want quarterly reviews. Every 3 months we sit down and assess whether this arrangement is working, whether adjustments need to be made, whether continuation makes sense. And at any review, either of us can initiate termination of employment with appropriate notice and severance. Also agreed. Though I'd prefer 6 months for the first review to give you adequate time to settle into the role. After that, quarterly assessments are reasonable. I took a deep breath, steadying myself for the final condition, the one that mattered most. Last condition. You help me establish a legitimate exit strategy. Over the course of my employment, you help me build skills and credentials that would translate to legal work elsewhere. References that don't require explaining criminal association, experience that looks conventional on a resume, maybe even education or certifications that would make me employable in normal contexts. I don't want to be trapped in your world forever. Dante. I want this to be a bridge to something sustainable and legitimate, not a permanent identity. The silence stretched long enough that I thought he might refuse, that I'd finally asked for something beyond what he was willing to provide. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an emotion I couldn't quite identify. That's the first time someone has accepted my offer while simultaneously planning their exit. Most people who enter my world assume they're in it permanently, either by choice or because they don't believe alternatives exist. Is that a no? It's a yes with admiration for your strategic thinking. I'll ensure you receive professional development, legitimate business experience, and credentials that translate beyond my organization. When you're ready to leave, you'll leave with skills that make you competitive in conventional markets. You have my word. Relief flooded through me so intensely my knees felt weak. Then I accept. When do I start? Monday. That gives you the weekend to process, to explain changes to Lily in whatever way feels appropriate, to prepare mentally for the transition. Monday morning, a moving service will arrive at your apartment at 8 a.m. They'll pack and transport your belongings to a new apartment I've selected in the Riverside Heights neighborhood. 2-bedroom, updated kitchen, building security, excellent school district. You and Lily will stay in a hotel this weekend. My treat. Make it an adventure for her while the logistics get handled. The speed of it made my head spin. That's 3 days from now. I need to give notice at my current job, inform Lily's school, pack, coordinate. There's too much to do in 3 days. Your current employer will receive notice that you're leaving for a family emergency, with 2 weeks' salary as courtesy, though you won't be working those weeks. Lily's school will receive transfer requests Monday morning, and all records will be forwarded to her new school, which has already reserved a spot in the appropriate grade. The packing service handles everything. You just need to supervise and indicate what goes where in the new apartment. Trust me, Maya, I've done this before. The logistics are simple when you have resources to deploy. I sank into a kitchen chair, overwhelmed by how quickly my entire life was being reorganized. This is really happening. I'm really doing this. You're really doing this. And Maya, for what it's worth, I believe you're making the right choice. Not because I'm the one benefiting, but because you're choosing your daughter's welfare over abstract principles. That's not weakness or moral failure. That's love manifesting as practical action. Tell me that again in 6 months when I'm complicit in things that keep me awake at night. I will. And I'll also remind you of Lily thriving in a good school, of asthma attacks managed with proper medication, of a childhood where she doesn't have to make herself smaller to fit into spaces that don't accommodate her. Both things will be true, Maya. The cost and the benefit, the compromise and the reward. Learning to hold both simultaneously is what separates children from adults. After we ended the call, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, feeling everything. Fear and relief and guilt and hope, all tangled together into an emotional knot I couldn't begin to unravel. I'd just agreed to work for a criminal, to leverage my invisibility to gather information for purposes I could only partially predict, to enter a world where problems disappeared through disturbing means, and loyalty was enforced through structures I didn't fully understand. But I'd also just secured my daughter's future, guaranteed her health insurance and education and stability, given myself breathing room to exist as something more than a collection of anxieties held together by determination and spite. At 11 p.m., I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion that never seemed to arrive, poured myself a glass, and sat on my small balcony looking at the city lights. This shabby apartment with its mold and broken radiator and thin walls, this had been my home, my fortress, the place where I'd fought my daily battles against circumstances that seemed designed to defeat me. In 3 days, I'd leave it behind for something better, safer, more comfortable. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the peculiar grief of leaving behind a struggle that had defined me, even as I recognized how unhealthy that definition had been. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Dante had sent the complete onboarding package. Employment contracts and benefits documentation and new apartment details and school information for Lily. Also included was an itinerary for the weekend, a hotel reservation at a place I'd driven past hundreds of times but never imagined entering, with a note that the pool was heated and Lily would probably enjoy it. The thoughtfulness of including something for Lily, of anticipating what would make this transition easier for an 8-year-old who didn't understand the complexity of what her mother had just agreed to. That small detail made my eyes burn with tears I refused to let fall. Dante Moretti was a criminal who made problems disappear through disturbing means, who operated in gray areas and employed people to gather information for purposes that wouldn't withstand ethical scrutiny. But he was also someone who remembered that little girls liked heated pools, who'd spent months learning my patterns because I reminded him of a mother he'd lost, who'd offered me a bridge out of drowning, even if that bridge led through morally complicated territory. People weren't simple. Choices weren't clean. And sometimes the right decision looked nothing like what you'd imagined it would when you were younger and more idealistic and hadn't yet learned how the world actually worked. I finished my wine and went inside, locking the balcony door behind me. In Lily's room, I stood in the doorway watching her sleep, her new stuffed animal tucked under one arm, her face peaceful and innocent and completely trusting that her mother would take care of her. "I'm doing this for you," I whispered into the darkness. "I hope someday you'll understand that every choice I made was for you." She didn't stir, didn't wake, just continued her peaceful breathing while I stood guard over her dreams. On Monday, our lives would change irrevocably. I'd become someone different, someone who worked for Dante Moretti and gathered information and existed in spaces between legal and illegal, legitimate and criminal. But Lily would have art classes and science museums and asthma medication without rationing. She'd have a childhood where yes was possible, where her potential wasn't limited by circumstances beyond her control, where she could take up space and want things and expect that the people who loved her would care about those wants. That had to be enough. That had to justify the compromise, the moral flexibility, the choice to accept help from a dangerous man, because the alternative was a different kind of danger that ground you down slowly instead of threatening you acutely. I returned to my bedroom and looked at the employment contract on my laptop screen, at the signature line waiting for my electronic acceptance. My finger hovered over the touchpad, giving myself one final moment to reconsider, to choose differently, to maintain the moral high ground even if it meant continued drowning. Then I thought about the little girl at the park, waiting patiently for a swing. I thought about Lily's face when she'd asked if we were rich now after receiving a sandwich for lunch. I thought about 3 years of barely surviving, of determination and stubbornness holding together a life that required more than individual will could provide. I signed the contract, clicked submit, and watched the confirmation message appear on my screen. Welcome to Moretti Industries. Your employment begins Monday, November 4th. We look forward to working with you. Just like that, it was done. The choice was made, the path selected, the future determined. I closed my laptop and climbed into bed, exhausted but somehow lighter, as if the weight of constant anxiety had lifted even as a different kind of weight settled into its place. In 3 days, we'd move to a new apartment in a better neighborhood. Lily would start at a new school with art programs and proper funding. I'd begin working for Dante Moretti, gathering information at social functions, leveraging my invisibility for purposes I could only partially control. The life I'd known, the struggle I'd defined myself by, would end. And something new, something dangerous and promising and morally complicated would begin. I'd made my choice. Now I'd have to live with it, for better or worse, for security and compromise, for Lily's future and my own complicity in whatever that future required. The universe rarely dealt in true accidents, Dante had said. Maybe he was right. Maybe the mistaken text message at 2 a.m. had been fate correcting course, putting me exactly where I needed to be, even if where I needed to be wasn't where I'd ever imagined going. Or maybe I was just rationalizing, finding meaning in randomness because accepting that I'd made this choice purely out of desperation was too heavy to carry. Either way, the choice was made. Monday was coming, and Maya Santos,